Hey guys, Sean here. How you doing? Hope you're all well. Anyway, this is my latest video, and a little bit more of a serious one, if I'm honest. So, as you guys know, or most of you know, that took part in the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride held at Brooklands in the UK. And obviously, it's a worldwide initiative, so I understand it was held everywhere.
Never could have been thinking I would know what the future bring, all the highs and lows.
So during the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, obviously we were raising money and trying to raise awareness, and this got me thinking about my own mortality and things like that. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a video for Movember to bring a little bit of awareness to two things really. One is people living with cancer, and two is mental health. Now, for those of you who don't have people or don't know people dealing with either of those, is that cancer in particular definitely does lend itself to people dealing with mental health difficulties, etc. And whilst there are two different, I would say, diseases or states of mind or physical items affecting people, they still have big impact on people, and I thought I would combine a video dealing with really essentially both of them. So before I continue any further, I just want to really just reiterate a few things. The things that I'm discussing today is really about my own experiences and views, and that's not necessarily an expert's opinion, or means that there's other people with different symptoms or how they found it. This is simply really just to get a debate going so that we can support people and be there for people who are affected by either cancer or mental health difficulties. So really the story begins with myself. I was diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, which is essentially a incurable form of cancer that affects your blood-based cells. I know that there's lots of treatments, etc., but this is something that obviously keeps reoccurring. So funny enough, the thing that happened was that I was diagnosed exactly on my birthday on the 12th of March, and it was a bit of a surreal experience. But anyway, let me not jump too far ahead. Let's go a little bit of a step backwards. Anyway, so I've always felt that I've been quite fortunate in life, and that things have really been good to me, and I've really been very happy and quite a relaxed kind of guy. But at the same time, I've also become quite insular over a period of time, focused on business and forgetting actually how to live life and doing other things. And one of the things that really stuck in my mind was probably about 2 weeks before I was diagnosed. I was actually looking at life insurance, this, that, and the next thing, and I thought to myself, no, I'm too young. This is not something that affects people like me. This is not I'm bulletproof. I don't really get sick. I don't really have any issues health-wise. And as luck would have it, 2 weeks later, bam, couldn't get. Now I'm in a position where I can't get life insurance. I can't get any of those things. And there's different new realities that they have to deal with. And this is where the mental part really starts. So you've got obviously the physical disease and the bits and pieces that goes alongside of that, and then you've got the mental health aspect which affects people. So my story really effectively starts there. So after I was diagnosed, I was a case of no problem, I've had a good life, if things happen. And that really is the first thing that starts affecting you, because as you can hear me talking, I'm sort of essentially making peace with the fact that I'm a goner. But that doesn't mean that, that doesn't necessarily mean that in all cases. And that's the first thing that I want to say to a lot of people is that, even if it's just a general mental health situation or to do with an illness, is that there are options and there are things, and you should always bear that in mind and never live in fear of what could happen, but focus on what you can do and the people around you. Anyway, so I went through this whole situation of, in tests and this, that, and the next thing, being poked literally full of holes every other day. I got to a point where my veins just went and ran and hard, and it was almost impossible. So it was definitely a journey. So you've got obviously the various phases in terms of cancer, which is obviously the pre-stage, which I've explained. Then it's the actual finding out that you have the cancer. Then it's the case of, well, what next? And this is probably the most difficult part, because you never know what to expect. And then you've obviously got the final part, which is dealing with the treatment, and obviously the last bit is what happens afterwards. Anyway, so I've explained to you now about what happened before, and now I've been diagnosed, and obviously I've been going through all the tests. So, as I said before, I felt that I had a good life, and that there's, I'm okay, and I was happy with whatever happened. Now, it's a case of talking to family, etc., and that's obviously where the difficulty started. So once you start talking to family, people take this hard, and because people aren't necessarily in the state of mind where you are. And again, I think a lot of it is a case of, it's almost like you are in denial, or pretending to be in denial, where you just sort of ignore what's actually going on, or you try and pretend that it's not real, or it's a case of telling yourself, well, that it doesn't matter. But this is what happens: is that cancer in particular is as much a mental fight as it is a physical fight, because it's not just a short-term sickness, it's a long-term sickness, and this is what brings up specifically the difficulties with mental health. And again, not to get too somber, and not to be this is the way that it is. It's more a case of, what, guys, let's start talking about this. Let's not be in a situation where you've got something that affects you and you don't talk to people, because that is simply the worst thing, as you'll see from my story. Anyway, so I was diagnosed, started going through all the various bits and pieces of treatment, and this is where it starts. So where do I go for treatment? Who do I go for treatment? Do I accept the first diagnosis? Do I go for second opinions? And I went through all of these bits and pieces. I got to a point where I felt that I needed to stick with the NHS because they've got some experimental treatments, etc. But again, that's just what people are telling me, and I was trying to get information, and it simply wasn't available, because again, the kind of person I am is I'm looking for some kind of definite. I want to know what's going on, and and unfortunately with this kind of thing, it's not something that actually exists. People can tell you, well, you've got to go through this and you've got to go through that, because there's so many different bits and pieces, diagnostic markers, there's so many different variations, and so there's very limited information available sort of from a general perspective. And this is obviously with my particular strain of cancer, and I know that there obviously are far more aggressive strains, etc., and there are differences. But again, focus for the purpose of this video really on just a case of understanding that there are people out there who aren't in the same boat as you, who are in a different state of mind and in a different physical place. So anyway, I started going through the NHS, and the one thing that I actually got to a point to was where I actually was feeling guilty to actually be in hospital. I won't mention the hospital names, but I was actually in one of the specialist type of hospitals for the NHS, and the people were very nice, I must say that. But the problem is that it's more of a sort of what do you call it, a production line of people. And again, it comes with the territory, and unfortunately these things are, but what I'm trying to get to here is that it starts to work on your mental health. It starts to affect you. And I was sat at times waiting to see the doctor, after having given bloods, etc. And there's guys that stopped breathing next to me that needed to be resuscitated. Some, one or two of them actually passed away. And you get to a point where you genuinely feel like, hang on a second, am I? Should I be here? You start feeling guilt, and this is where it slowly but surely breaks you down. Anyway, so I went through the process and got to the point where, I needed to go for treatment, etc. So, as part of this getting ready process, I had to go for some bone marrow biopsies. I'll tell you what, this is probably 3 of the most excruciating experiences I've ever been through, because simply the first few didn't work. You get essentially a needle that's about yay long, I don't know, best part of 8 to 10 inches, and basically they've got to put that into your hip, or just at the back, sort of on your buttocks area, and that goes through into your not spine, but your hip bone, where they then push the needle, this hollow needle into, when they put another needle into, and then suck out the bone marrow. And unfortunately, what happened with me is that I got the injection, but it only gives you sort of numbness, in the area for about that much. And because I'm a big guy, there's a lot more meat to penetrate. And so the moments that went past that, obviously you feel everything, and it got to the point where, for whatever reason, the positioning that this chap was using wasn't right, and you could actually feel the needle scraping on the bone, but it obviously didn't work, and I had to end up repeating the process 3 times. So that is the one thing that really is was, from a physical point, hurt, but from a mental point of view, again, it continues to break you down. Now you become fearful of things in the future, etc. Anyway, get that over, and then I went into being in a situation where I was going through the treatment. Then I started my treatment, or was meant to start my treatment, and the doctor made all the arrangements. I got there for the treatment, and nobody knew that I was coming. And that's how I started. So I ended up saying, no, that's it. And I went for private treatment. And that's where, at least from a treatment perspective, and how you feel whilst you're in hospital, that was really great. I then went through that. But this is, again, where the physical and the mental part actually starts hitting you again, is now you go through the treatment. Now, I was going through a chemotherapy regime, which is RFC, rituximab, fludarabine, and cyclophosphamide. And a few things happened there. One is I had 9 months of nausea, and that was very difficult. Nothing you do will take that feeling away. The other thing that actually happened to me as well is I gained a huge amount of weight. So I ended up gaining, which is about 7 stone in 6 months. So stone, in English, and if you're looking for kilos, it's probably in the region of 42 to 45 kilos, or the best part of 90 pounds in a 6-month period. And it's because of the anti-sickness that they give you as part of the regime, which I had a hypersensitivity to, and I ended up gaining a huge amount of weight, which to this day really I'm battling to shift. Whilst going through the treatments, a few things happened. I heard that it was a good idea to do some exercise to try and strengthen your body to get you through it better. So I went to the gym, and I did literally about 10-15 minutes of super light workout, and the next thing I knew, I was in a situation where I simply couldn't walk for the best part of 2 or 3 weeks. I was bedridden, and it was an excruciating thing. So again, this is more bits and pieces that works on the mental side of it. And I remember being in a situation where people around you didn't care, and I had phone calls for people demanding money from me because whilst I was attached to the drip in the hospital, and I was saying to this guy, listen, I'm in a hospital, I'm having treatment for cancer, please, I'll call you back later. And the guy's shouting at me on the phone, you need to do this now, you need to do that now. And again, it just really breaks you down, because you feel like you need to isolate yourself. And this is, again, where the mental keeps joining in with the physical. And then what happens is, once you finish the treatment, you need to start getting used to some new realities. And these are the fact that now you don't have any immunity. I had pneumonia, I don't know, 6-7 times in a short period of space of time. I was in a point where, I would have a sore throat one day, 2-3 days later, I'm in hospital, I can't breathe. This is how it affects you. Also, then I was in a situation where you get affected by all sorts of other illnesses, and again, you're in a point where it attacks your joints and things, and the next thing you can't walk again. Really, for those of you who have experienced it, or specifically if you haven't, what this does is that it really limits you. And I keep going back to the point of, it's a new reality. You really have to get used to being different and having to cope to different things. And this is, again, where the difficulty comes, is because people around you don't necessarily understand that you don't have the energy to be able to do things that you were doing before, that you don't have the motivation in the same ways that you were doing before. And you get to a point where you do become insular, and you do shut yourself off around people, because you're trying not to deal with emotion, you're trying not to deal with things. And this is where the problem comes in, is that actually then starts to hit you more than you realize, and you go through bits and pieces where you think, no, everything is fine, but actually this is the problem. It really isn't. And this is one of the things that I experienced. And it really was a case of having to find my way back from that, and to find my way and find myself again, really, because I was not the same person. And it was a little bit like I was lost in reality of things that I didn't really fully understand. Anyway, so when I was making my recovery, etc., I decided that I wanted to start showing that people can do things, and that there is hope. So I started doing, obviously, as you guys may or may not know, these long distance motorcycle rides. So I would do 1,200 miles, from my early trips anyway, in a couple of days. So I would go from London to Edinburgh for the weekend, or I would go from London to Germany for the weekend. This is where things started for me, because I wanted to just show that actually, not just to people around me, but also to myself, that life doesn't have to end. And although physically things are different for me, and I can't necessarily go running and be the strongest guy around, that there are other things that I can do. And this is part of the sort of I would say, the healing process. Anyway, so obviously, as guys know, that I'm now out and about doing all sorts of bits and pieces. And although I need to go back for treatment again at some point, well, actually I should have gone back already, but I've been deferring treatment a little bit for lots of reasons which I won't go into at this point in time. But generally speaking, I'm in a far better mental mode. However, again, this is getting back to the reason for this video, is please, guys, don't get caught up with being an insular person when it comes to mental health or dealing with cancer, because all it does is that it breaks you down. You've got people around you. Talk to the people, rely on the people around you, seek help. And if you don't get help to start with, go back and look again. But don't give up, because at the end of the day, nothing ever can prepare you for what you're going to face with these kinds of things. But what you can do is seek help and try and get better. So the result of my journey is one of, my motto is I'd never say no to anything anymore. I'm trying to be a far nicer and a more approachable person, which is something that for a while I wasn't. And I just try and grab life and live it to the absolute fullest. So that's what I would say to you guys as a sort of passing comments with regards to this. Is guys, please do me a favor, whether or not you have mental health or not, live life to the full. Live life like it's your last day. I'm not saying be reckless or anything like that, but what I am saying is appreciate the little things, because you never know when they're going to be gone, or you're going to need to get used to a new reality. So do me a favor, guys. Make sure you talk and get as much of this message out there as possible. And last but not least is, if you could, please share this video, and also make sure that you put a comment down there. These comments show the support to people, show people that we are serious about mental health and people living with cancer, and that's, you know, there is hope for them, and that there are people that care about them like us, and that they're not having to go through these things on their own. So please, guys, please support this initiative, and I really appreciate your time. So not the normal, please donate. That's not what I'm asking for. On this one, what I'm asking for is, please talk. Go out, talk to people, and make sure that people know that they are loved and they are valuable.
Change the way I love it. Maybe if I try to fix this heart, then I could have stayed the night, I could have called you mine. If I change the way, then I change my mind. Baby, we got time to make this right. Can I be the one that you need? Maybe if I change the way I love